There is a question that slithers through the back alleys of your mind, a whisper you've learned to ignore, yet it never truly disappears. Who are you when no one is watching? You've built a name, a face, a story, but what if that narrative is not yours? What if it was stitched together by the hands of fear, habit, and inherited delusion? You call it self. But tell me, do you know the architect of this self? Or are you merely a mask that has forgotten the flesh beneath? From the moment you were born, you were given a script. Now life, a role. You were told to behave, to succeed, to smile on command. And in your obedience, a silent death began. The death of the unspoken, the raw, the you that existed before language. You buried it beneath layers of ego, this elegant parasite, this golden cage disguised as autonomy. But what if that cage is no lock? What if the bars are made not of steel but of belief? And what if belief is the deepest prison of all? The ego promises freedom while stitching your wings shut with threads of comparison, pride, and fear. It whispers, you are special, but never lets you feel whole. It builds a palace in your mind, then exiles your soul to the basement. And you've lived there so long, in that flickering half-light, you've mistaken shadows for substance. But have you ever wondered who's pulling the strings? Who profits from your performance? Could be that the ego isn't you, but clever actor hijacking your stage? There's a wound in you, ancient, unhealed, carved not by pain, but by illusion. And every time you say, I am this, I am that, it bleeds a little more. But here's the riddle. What bleeds is real, what speaks is not. So what if the voice inside your head is not a mirror, but a mask? What if your so-called self is just a hallucination crafted by memory, trauma, and repetition? You've never looked behind it, because you were never taught how. But what waits there in the silence beyond identity might not comfort you. It might undo you. You will not leave this video with answers. You will leave with fire, with a crack in the glass you once called reality. Because once the illusion begins to shatter, it does not stop. And once you glimpse what lies beneath the ego, you can never unsee it. But beware, that glimpse may cost you everything you believe yourself to be. The only question is, are you ready to lose who you are in order to become what you are? They told you that you are someone, a name, a profession, a voice among voices. But beneath that voice, there is a silence you've been taught to fear. Because in that silence, the lies begin to rot. You were never asked what you are, only who, as if personality were essence, as if identity were truth. And so you built yourself like a monument on a Ria Movetica, adorning as ruinas with medals of virtue, titles, and traumas, pretending it was all solid ground. But tell me, what happens when the wind rises and the ground no longer obeys? You confuse performance with presence, applause with affection, validation with visibility. The ego feeds on these echoes, not because they nourish, but because they distract. And you became its willing priest, offering your authenticity on the altar of belonging. Every smile you forced, every silence che voce ingoliu, every version of yourself you performed for acceptance, it layered your being with shadows. Until now, you can no longer tell where you end, and the mask begins. But there is something beneath, isn't there? A pulse, a tension, a memory of something ancient, uncorrompido, silenciado mas neo morto. Can you feel it? That ache in the chest that isn't pain, but imprisonment. Sometimes in the stillness of an unguarded moment, just before sleep, or in the middle of a gaze you didn't expect. You hear it, a whisper that does not come from your mind, but from somewhere deeper, older. It asks nothing. It simply is. And it terrifies you, because if that whisper is real, then the story you tell yourself is not. You were taught to fear chaos, to clutch tightly to your ego as if it were a lifeboat in an indifferent sea. But maybe the lifeboat is the illusion, and the sea is what you truly are, infinite, amoral, uncontrollable. You spent your life damming rivers that were meant to flood. Who convinced you that control was salvation? The ego is clever. It wraps its chains in gold. It tells you you are free as long as you remain within its map. It defines you by memory, what you did, what they did to you, what you survived. But memory is not identity. It is residue. And if you scrape deep enough, what remains may not resemble what you called self. What if your traumas were not the scars on your soul, but the ink with which your ego painted its boundaries? What if your suffering was not your weight, but your leash? There is a difference between healing and dissolving. One seeks to restore the ego. The other seeks to see beyond it. Which path have you truly walked? You say, I know who I am. But who is speaking? The wounded child who learned to please? The protector who learned to fight? The lover who learned to disappear inside others? Or is it the voice beneath all voices, the one you've locked in the basement of your own awareness? That voice does not beg for attention. It does not decorate itself with virtues or postures. It simply burns, and its fire consumes everything that is false. Are you ready for that fire? Are you ready to let go not of your past, but of your entire idea of existence? Because this is not a lesson. This is not a teaching. This is the mirror you've avoided your whole life. And now, there's nowhere left to turn. You were not born to play a role in someone else's theater. You were born as a question, raw, untamed, unfinished. But the world feared that question, so it gave you answers too soon. It said, be this, do that, don't look behind the curtain. And in your hunger for love, for certainty, you obeyed. But deep inside, the question never died. It waits, it watches, and tonight, in this flicker of digital light, it returns to you, not as a scream, not as a revelation, but as a simple presence, the feeling that everything you called me might be just a costume, and the actor beneath has never spoken, not yet, and so we spiral, not downward, not upward, but inward, into the aching center of your being, where the ego dissolves like mist in the heat of a greater light. You may feel disoriented. You may feel betrayed by your own thoughts. Good. That's the beginning. Because you were never meant to find comfort here. You were meant to burn, to unravel, to remember not what the world told you you are, but what you were before language, before mirrors, before approval. And if you dare follow this voice to the end, you may not like what you find, but you will recognize it as truth, as home, as you without the ego. What if the self you defended your whole life was never yours to begin with, but a mask you inherited, wore, and forgot to remove, not out of malice, but out of survival, not out of ignorance, but out of love, that fragile love we learn to beg for when we are too young to know who we are. And now, as the echoes begin to fade, you find yourself staring at the space beneath the surface and realizing it stares back. The ego promised you safety, but at the cost of silence. It gave you identity, but stole your essence. Now, something ancient stirs, not loud, but undeniable. A truth not taught, but remembered. You feel it not in words, but in the spaces between them, like forgotten melody you once knew before memory. And as it returns, the false begins to peel away, not with violence, but with grace, like ash falling from a fire already burned. No one can walk this path for you. No name, no role, no doctrine. Only the unbearable honesty of standing naked before the mirror of your own becoming. This is not the end. It is the pause before awakening, the breath before the leap. You were never your ego. You were the one watching it, waiting, aching to be free, not to become someone else, but to finally be no one. So let this moment sink, not into your thoughts, but into your marrow. Let it disturb, confuse, liberate. Let it haunt you in your quiet hours, because in that haunting, something sacred stirs, not an answer, not a conclusion, but a doorway, And the key was never lost. If this voice reach a place in you that words rarely touch, then do not silence it. Breathe with it. Move with it. Let others feel it. Share, comment, subscribe, not out of habit, but because some truths demand to be remembered, especially the ones we spent a lifetime trying to forget.